I was home alone, with nothing but the sound of rain hitting the windows to keep me company. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me in charge of the house. I was only 11 years old, but I felt like a responsible adult being left alone for the first time. Being home alone was always exciting for me. I could watch TV as late as I wanted, eat all the snacks I desired, and even play video games until my eyes couldn't stay open anymore. But tonight was different. The storm outside made the house feel eerie, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I decided to distract myself by watching some TV. I snuggled up on the couch and turned my favorite show on. But as I tried to focus on the TV, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. I looked around the dark living room, but there was no one there. I told myself that it was just my imagination and continued watching my show. The TV suddenly went black, causing me to jump in shock. I thought it was just a power outage due to the storm, but when I looked at my phone, I saw that it was fully charged. I tried to turn on the TV back on, but it wouldn't budge. I started to feel a little panicked now. What if someone was in the house with me and they were messing with the TV? I tried to calm myself down and remember that the power was just be out. I decided to get a candle from the kitchen to give myself some light. As I walked towards the kitchen, I noticed that the floorboards were creaky. I froze in place, and my heart raced with fear. I told myself that it was just the old house settling and I was just overthinking things. I reached the kitchen and lit a candle. The faint's light flickered, casting shadows on the walls, making me feel even more on edge. I quickly grabbed a sack and went back to the living room, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But then, I heard a loud bang coming from upstairs. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I would burst out of my chest. I tried to convince myself that it was just a storm causing things to shift around upstairs, but then I heard footsteps walking down the stairs. The sound was slow and deliberate, and I couldn't believe what was happening. I was home alone, but someone was clearly in the house with me. I sat frozen on the couch, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't have any neighbors close enough to run for help, and I didn't want to leave the safety of the living room. But I knew I had to do something. I mustered up the courage to get up and quickly make my way towards the stairs, holding the candle in front of me like a shield. As I made my way to the staircase, I saw a dark figure at the top. I couldn't make up any features. It was just a shadow looming over me. I let out a scream and ran back to the living room, slamming the door closed behind me. I stood there, panting and shaking, trying to comprehend what was happening. But then I heard it. The doorknob to the living room was slowly turning, and the door opened with a creak. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was him, the man from the top of the stairs. He was wearing a dark hoodie and his face was hidden in the shadows. I was paralyzed with fear as he slowly made his way towards me. I was trapped with nowhere to go. I screamed for help, hoping someone would hear me and come to my rescue. But the man only laughed, a deep and sinister laugh that sent shivers down my spine. He towered over me, his cold hand reaching out to touch me. But before I could even react, the power suddenly came back on, and the room was filled with light. The man disappeared, and I was left standing there, alone and disorientated. I ran to the door, flung it open, and ran out of the storm. I didn't stop until I reached my neighbor's house. They called the police and they searched the entire house, but they found nothing. They told me it was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me, but I knew what I had seen. I was sure that it was just not my imagination. After that night, I refused to be alone in the house. I couldn't even set foot in the living room without feeling a sense of dread. My parents didn't understand why I was so scared and worried about being home alone, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them what had happened. Months went by and the incident started to feel like a distant memory. But then the news came of a break-in and the murder that had occurred in a nearby town. The suspect was still at large, and I had to go on was a vague description of a man wearing a dark hoodie. My heart stopped as I realized that it could have been the same man that invaded my home that night. My worst fears were confirmed when the police finally caught the suspect, and his mugshot was all over the news. It was him, the same man I saw in my house that night. I still get chills thinking about that terrifying experience. It's a night I will never forget, and it taught me to always trust my instincts, and that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places. Now, I never feel completely at ease when I'm home alone, always aware that there might be someone watching me, someone waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. I sat on the couch, alone in my house. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and my older brother was staying at a friend's house. I was used to being alone in the house, but as the sun began to set, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I tried to keep myself occupied by watching TV, but every creak and groan of the old house made my heart race. I could feel the sense of dread building inside me, and as if someone was watching me from the shadows. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but then I heard it. A faint tapping at the window. I froze in fear, my eyes glued to the window. I couldn't see anything through the darkness outside, but the tapping continued. I slowly made my way to the window, my heart pounding my chest. As I got closer, the tapping seemed to get louder and more urgent. I reached out with a trembling hand and slowly pulled back the curtain. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a shadowy figure standing just a few feet away, its long, twisted fingers tapping on the glass. I screamed and stumbled backwards, frantically searching for my phone to call the police. But as I unlocked my phone, the figure disappeared, leaving behind only the sound of the tapping on the glass. I was shaking with fear, but I tried to convince myself that it was just my overreactive imagination. I turned on the volume on the TV and tried to focus on the show, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I let out a shriek of terror as I fumbled for my phone, my hand shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. I turned on the flashlight and quickly made my way to the circuit breaker to try and restore the power. I was about to flip the switch, and I heard a low whisper coming from behind me. "You can't hide from me," it said, sending me shivers down my spine. I looked around, but saw no one. The whisper seemed to be coming from all around me. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear the sound of my own labored breathing. I quickly turned on all the lights in the house, hoping to chase away the darkness and whatever sinister presence was lurking within. But the lights only seemed to intensify the feeling of being watched. I decided I needed to leave the house and go stay with the neighbor until my parents came back. But as I rushed towards the front door, it slammed shut on my face, trapping me inside. I frantically tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I heard the whisper again, this time much closer. "You can't leave. I won't let you," it said, its voice growing louder and more menacing. I tried to find the source of the voice, but saw no one. My mind was filled with terror and confusion. Was I going crazy? Was this all just a nightmare? But when I turned back to the door, I saw a handprint slowly forming on the glass from the outside. I watched in horror as the handprint seemed to press against the glass, as if trying to break in. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely hold it. I was prepared to defend myself from whatever evil presence was in my house. But then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. It was coming from my bedroom upstairs. Without thinking, I dropped the knife and ran towards the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the top of the stairs, I was hit with a wave of the cold air that seemed to sap all the warmth from my body. I could see my breath forming in front of me as I cautiously made my way towards the bedroom. Pushing open the door, I saw that my room was in shambles. The drawers were open, clothes had been thrown all over the room, and my bed sheets were ripped to shreds. But what caught my eye the most was the figure standing in the corner of the room, facing away from me. It was tall and thin, with long, spindly arms and legs. It was dressed in tattered clothes, and its body seemed to sway as if it were a smoke. My mouth turned dry as I realized that I was face to face with the figure that had been haunting me all evening. Slowly, it turned to face me, revealing a grinning, grotesque face covered in scars and decaying skin. Its pierced red eyes seemed to bore into my soul as it slowly began to approach me, its body contorting in unnatural ways. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or even scream. Just as I thought I was about to meet my end, my parents burst through the front door, having to come home early. The figure disappeared in a puff of smoke, and I collapsed to the ground, relieved but traumatized by the experience. Throughout the years, I've never been able to explain what happened that night. Some say it was just a vivid nightmare, but I know the truth. There was something malevolent in my house that night, something that wanted to take me away with it. I never stayed alone in the house again, and I always made sure to keep the lights on and the doors locked, just in case. I may never know what the figure was or why it targeted me, but one thing for sure, I will never forget that terrifying and unforgettable night when I was home alone. It was a dark and stormy night. I was home alone as my parents had gone for a dinner party. I was used to being alone at home, but this night was different. The howling wind and the pounding rain made the house feel eerie and unsettling. I tried to shake it off the feeling and distract myself by watching TV, but I couldn't shake off the sense of impending doom. Just as I was about to turn off the TV and head to bed, I heard a loud thud coming from the kitchen. My heart started racing, and I quickly turned on all lights in the house. I cautiously made my way to the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. As I entered the kitchen, I saw that all the cabinets and drawers were wide open. My stomach dropped as I realized that I had closed all of them before going to watch TV. I tried to convince myself that it was just a power outage and the wind had caused the cabinets to open. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. My mind immediately went to all horror movies I had seen where the protagonist was home alone and terrorized by the supernatural entity. I tried to push those thoughts away and went to close the cabinets, but as I reached for the first one, I heard a whisper in my ear. "Leave them open." I froze. The voice sounded like a whisper, but it felt like it was coming from inside my head. I turned around, but no one was there. I quickly closed all cabinets and ran to my room, locking the door behind me. I tried to brush off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I sat on my bed, trying to calm myself down. After a while, I convinced myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me and that I decided to go to bed. Just as I was about to close my eyes, I heard a loud banging on my window. I dropped out of my bed, my heart racing once again. I cautiously approached the window and opened the curtains, expecting to find a tree branch or something that had been carried by the wind. But instead, I saw a face pressed against the window. It was dark, sunken eyes and sinister grin on his face. I let out a blood-curdling scream and ran out of my room. I heard the window shatter and the sound of glass breaking as I ran down the stairs. I didn't know what to do, so I called the police before hiding in the closet under the stairs. As I waited for the police to arrive, I heard footsteps walking around the house and whispers coming from all directions. I felt like I was being watched and my heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. I had never believed in ghosts or the supernatural, but at that moment, I was sure that I was being haunted by something evil. The police arrived after what it felt like hours, but in reality, it only being a few minutes. They searched the house but found nothing. The window in my room was shattered, but there was no sign of anyone entering the house. They suggested that it was probably just a prank, but I knew deep down that it wasn't. As they left, I was left alone in the house once again. I was too scared to sleep, so I stayed up all night, sitting on the couch with all the lights on. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the sinister face pressing against my window. I was starting to lose my mind. The next morning, my parents came home and found me trembling in the couch. I told them everything that had happened, but they too brushed it off as a prank. But things didn't stop here. I would hear whispers and footsteps, and every night I would see the sinister face at my window. I tried to tell my friends and family, but no one believed me. They thought I was just going through a phase or imagining things. I started to feel like I was going crazy. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus on anything else. One night, as I lay in bed, too terrified to close my eyes, I heard the front door creak open. I heard a slow, deliberate footsteps coming up the stairs. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or even scream. The footsteps grew closer and closer until they stopped right outside my bedroom door. "Come play with me," a voice whispered from the other side of the door. Tears streamed down my face as I realized this wasn't a prank or my imagination. This was real, and I was alone in facing this evil entity. Suddenly, the door flew open, and the sinister face was staring right at me. I let out a scream before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in hospital. My parents were by my side, and they explained to me that the police had found me unconscious and unresponsive in my room. They didn't know what happened to me, but they were relieved that I was okay. But I knew what had happened. I had been terrorized by a malevolent entity, and I was lucky to have survived. From that day on, I never stayed home alone again. I could never shake off the feeling of being watched, and I couldn't forget the terrifying experience I had in that house. I never found out what entity was or why it chose to terrorize me, but I knew it was something beyond our understanding, something truly evil. I could only hope that it would never set its eyes on me again. I never thought I would be scared to be alone in my own home. I had always enjoyed the peace and quiet, and especially after a long day at work. But ever since my husband had gone away on a business trip for 2 weeks, I had been engulfed in a sense of unease whenever I was alone in the house. It was a chilly Friday evening, and I had just come back from work. The house was dark and silent, and the only source of light being the streetlights outside. I couldn't wait to change into my cozy pajamas and indulge in some much-needed alone time. But as I was about to settle on the couch, a loud crash from the kitchen startled me. My heart raced as I cautiously made my way towards the source of the noise. I didn't see anything out of place, but the feeling of being watched sent shivers down my spine. Trying to brush off my unease, I went back to the living room. only to hear another crash, this time from the bathroom. My mind raced with thoughts of potential intruder or burglar. But upon investigation, I found nothing but an open window in the far corner of the bathroom. I tried to calm myself down, convincing myself that it was just the wind in my overreactive imagination. However, that sense of being watched only intensified as the night went on. I decided to lock all the windows and doors, but the sense of unease wouldn't leave me. That's when I remembered my husband's advice to always keep our house security system armed when I was alone. I quickly armed the system and crawled into bed, hoping to get some rest. But just as I was dozing off, the alarm went off, signaling an intrusion at the front door. My heart was pounding in my chest as I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I could hear footsteps coming closer and the doorknob jiggling as someone tried to get in. My hands were shaking as I waited for the police to arrive. I could hear the intruder trying to break in the house, but thankfully, the alarm scared them off before they could get inside. The police arrived, but they found no signs of an attempted break-in. While the police were there, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. But I dismissed it as my own fear and paranoia. The police left, but the unease stayed with me. I couldn't bring myself to sleep that night. Every little creak or noise made me jump. I even convinced myself that I heard someone whispering my name. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that I finally dozed off from exhaustion. The next day, I went about my usual routine, trying to push the previous night's events to the back of my mind. I even checked the security camera footage, but there was no evidence of anyone trying to break in. It was probably just a glitch in the system, I thought. But that night, as I was about to go to bed, the alarm went off again. This time, I could hear someone trying to open the windows and doors, their footsteps getting closer and closer. I reached for my phone, but it wasn't there. I must have left it in the living room. I knew I had to get out of the house, but I was frozen in fear. Just as I was about to make it for a run, the door to my bedroom burst open, and a figure stepped into the room. My screams were muffled as a hand covered my mouth. I could feel the whole breath on the back of my neck as the intruder whispered, "Don't make a sound." My heart was racing as I tried to break free, but the intruder was too strong. I could see the glint of the knife in their hand, and the realization that there was not a prank or misunderstanding that had hit me with like a ton of bricks. I closed my eyes expecting for the worst, but instead the intruder spoke again. "Don't be afraid, I just want to talk." My eyes snapped open in confusion as the intruder stepped back, releasing me. Who was this person and what did they want? I couldn't find my voice to ask questions that were running through my mind. The figure sat on the edge of my bed, their face shrouded in shadows, but I could feel the sense of intensity of their gaze on me. They spoke in a deep, raspy voice. "I've been watching you for a while now. You have such a beautiful home, and you seem to live such a perfect life. I just want to be a part of it." I was horrified. This person had been watching me. They knew my schedule, my habits, my home. I tried to reason with them, asking them to leave and promising not to call the police if they did. But they seemed adamant on staying. They told me stories of how they had followed me on my daily routines, watched me through the windows, and even observed my interactions with my husband. I realized that this person was completely obsessed with me, and the thought sent chills down my spine. Finally, after what seemed like hours, this person got up to leave. But before disappearing into the night, they gave me a chilling warning. "Don't think you can escape me. I will always be watching." I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and when morning came, I immediately called for my husband to come home. He was shocked to find me huddled in a corner, terrified and traumatized by the events of the night. We installed a new security system and changed all locks, but the fear of being watched and stalked never left me. I couldn't be alone in the house anymore without constantly checking and rechecking the locks. Even though the intruder never returned, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being constantly watched. It was a horrifying experience that left me with a permanent sense of paranoia.